In the modern world, different denominations within the liberal churches are more and more stressing humanistic principles and goals.
We Unitarian Universalists, for instance, put our emphasis on the humanity of Jesus as a human being and his humanistic message, and decidedly reject biblical morality and myth when it offends human reason, moral sensibilities, and scientific facts.
That's very true. As a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church, I don't find any difference between the principles and goals of Unitarian humanists and those who call themselves either religious humanists, naturalistic humanists, ethical humanists, as in the Ethical Culture Society, or secular humanists.
And for what may be an interesting break or departure from the religion which predates Christ and Christianity.
What is Judaic humanism?
Judaic humanism is a distinct movement in the United States, Western Europe, and Israel. It's known organizationally as humanistic Judaism. It can best be described as a non-theistic humanism, wrapped in the traditions of the Talmud and Jewish history, with a philosophy that reinforces our attachment to Jewish history and culture.
It began 20 years ago in the first Detroit suburb where the first American Jewish humanist congregation was formed.
Now there are many such congregations nationally, all free from reliance on supernatural authority, relying solely on reason and scientific method to determine how to live and behave as better human beings.
So we humanistic Jews acknowledge our identity by celebrating all Jewish holidays and giving them a secular Jewish interpretation.
And we believe strongly in the right of Israel to be a state, but most of us are against the involvement of religion with its rigid orthodoxy in Israeli politics.
I guess the answers to the last three questions need the answer to this one for greater clarity.
Is humanism against religion?
Humanism is not against religion. There are many humanists who are religious, and there are many who are not. Humanists are just against religion being sneaked or forced into the political and educational fabric of this nation. I believe, that religion is the most fundamental choice all of us can make without connivance or pressure. All the Americans who died to preserve our democracy also died to ensure our freedom to worship or not to worship if that's our choice, and not to be forced to belong to any one denomination.
We're against religious groups using God and other religious reasons to try to influence the outcome of an election or to pressure for legislation, and especially to try to change the Constitution. We're just as against any religious group that tries to take away the rights of other religious groups, and also against people with no religious beliefs who try to do the same thing through pressure on the government or any of its agencies. And by the way, we feel just as strongly about the government itself trying to influence or control anyone's religious beliefs.
It's very simple and very fair. We want our elected officials to work for the government, not for any religious group or denomination.
We're concerned that so many times in world history, religion has been the cause and at times the actual instigator of terrible wars between nations. Look at what's happening in the Middle East, for example, where religion is so much a part of politics. Think of how many wars could be prevented and how many lives saved if religion would stay out of government and politics.
And not only is the separation between church and state a wise and necessary safeguard for America, but for the rest of the world too.
The next two questions to be answered are like two sides of the same coin.
Is humanism a religion? Is humanism a philosophy?
Just as in ethical culture and religious humanism, many humanists regard humanism as their religion, a religion of ethics, without worship of a deity and prayer.
Many humanist organizations, including the American Humanist Association, have their own certified ministers or counselors who are legally authorized to perform weddings, act as chaplains in prisons, and all the other pastoral duties.
And to me, 20th century humanism is a moral philosophy that's appealing to people of different cultural backgrounds all over the world. It calls for the basic moral values, affirming the dignity and worth of every person, of living in harmony with nature, and of helping the sick and the poor.
values that every traditional religion contains to a greater or lesser extent. Humanism as a moral or ethical standard is appealing to Jew, Gentile, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, and Christian alike.
Perhaps now you should have a better idea about whether humanism is religion, philosophy, or an ideal combination of both.
What's the difference between humanism and traditional religion?
Humanism was already present and influencing the ideas and values of the Mediterranean world when Christianity began. The humanism of today and today's Judeo-Christian moral and ethical values share a common historical heritage. Humanism differs only in how it views the source of these moral and ethical values. It holds that they are determined by humans themselves rather than being handed down from mountaintops by unseen gods or supernatural sources. Actually, if you were to remove all the theological and supernatural ideas from both Judaism and Christianity, you'd have humanism remaining as the basic ethical system. These ethics and morals dictate how we deal with, behave, and live with one another in this lifetime.
So much for the general. Now to the specific. Some answers to questions about how humanists regard current contemporary issues.
Why do humanists fight parents who want to remove from schools and libraries books that they find undesirable?
Humanists will always fight the pressure groups who want certain books removed from schools and libraries, no matter what their declared intentions might be. We feel that parents that want to remove or burn books are not only limiting what their own children will read and learn, but what other American children will read and learn, which is clearly a violation of the other children's constitutionally guaranteed rights to free speech and free inquiry.
Why shouldn't parents who send their children to private schools get tuition tax credits?
As a very concerned school administrator and as a humanist, I believe that parents who send their children to private or parochial schools should not receive tuition tax credits, because that would tend to subsidize the segregated schools of the bigot, the private schools of the wealthy, and religious education in general. All this out of the ever-diminishing and in many areas inadequate funding of our public school system.
Has evolution ever been proven scientifically?
Yes, evolution has been proven scientifically to the satisfaction of tens of thousands of scientists the world over. By contrast, creationism is a term manufactured by the religious fundamentalists for what they want taught in schools as science.
Science is a method of inquiry concerned with determining the truth about our physical world. It has for centuries gone about this search by adhering to a set of rules for discovering these truths called the scientific method. Using this scientific method of rigorous examination by the many disciplines of science, from biology to archaeology, from chemistry to paleontology, including physics, anatomy, astronomy, geology, and so on, this scientific inquiry, with its most stringent and rigorous requirements for accuracy and detail, has determined the following: that the Earth is at least 4.5 billion years old, and that man, as we recognize him, has been walking the planet for tens of thousands of years. Furthermore, scientific investigation has revealed through meticulous evaluation of the fossilized remains of our human ancestors that before man there was a creature that resembled our present-day apes, an ancestor for man and apes today. And that before these ape-like creatures there were the reptiles, and long before the reptiles, hundreds of millions of years before, only the fossilized remains of plants and the simplest life forms are to be found. By using the most sophisticated and sensitive instruments, scientists can actually date these remains and those of the reptiles, the ape-like creatures, and man's most ancient ancestors to an accuracy sometimes of just a few hundred years. What this dating shows is that there has been a continual, progressive process of cumulative change from the simpler life forms to the present. This is not theory, it's fact. Fact based upon an accumulation of evidence by thousands of researchers working for over half a century. To discount, as the creationists, all the accumulated evidence literally unearthed by thousands of scientists and believe that God created the earth just 10,000 years ago with all the living things upon it in their present form is religion, requiring an act of faith that flies in the face of the contemporary understanding of science and scientifically developed facts. If we accept that it was science and the scientific method which got us to the moon and beyond through its research into the physical laws which we all agree govern our existence, then how can all these years of research into the origin of life by these same scientists and others like them be discounted as fiction?